We all saw him do it. 23-1 odds, coming from dead last to storm down the track and tear the Kentucky Derby right out of the hands of the favourites. In under 2 minutes, Golden Tempo didn't just win a race. He became a global obsession. The entire world was begging for a hero, ready to follow this horse straight into the history books. But then, the fairy tale shattered just 4 days later, when he was healthy, sound, and at the absolute peak of his powers. His team did something that felt like a punch to the gut. They quit the chase. They pulled him from the Preakness Stakes and walked away from ultimate glory. The racing world erupted in fury. Fans felt cheated. Purists called it a corporate betrayal. But behind closed doors, a silent revolution was happening. This wasn't fear. It was a cold, calculated, multi-million-dollar gamble that changed the rules of greatness forever. Was this a masterstroke of genius that saved a champion? Or a heartbreaking move that forever stole his chance at immortality? Let's unwrap the real truth behind why everyone is questioning Golden Tempo. Under the legendary spires of Churchill Downs, Golden Tempo's 23-1 Kentucky Derby victory didn't just shock the world. It ignited an intense ideological war. While casual fans celebrated the spectacular last-to-first surge, seasoned turf analysts immediately labelled the triumph a deceptive mirage. Skeptics vehemently argued this wasn't a display of absolute athletic superiority, but a chaotic mathematical fluke. The heavily favoured frontrunners collapsed after setting a suicidal early pace, essentially rolling out a red carpet for a deep closer. To the critics, Golden Tempo didn't outrun his generation. He simply inherited a fractured race, escaping the carnage, while superior horses burned themselves out on the front end. This severe skepticism transformed what should have been a crowning achievement into a polarizing mystery. Was jockey Jose Ortiz's daring rail-skimming rally a masterclass in tactical brilliance, or merely an incredibly fortunate trip that fooled the racing world? The industry became deeply fractured, refusing to grant the colt the unconditional reverence typically reserved for a classic champion. Every stride of his final 16th was placed under a relentless analytical microscope, with doubters insisting a rematch under controlled conditions would expose him entirely. In a single afternoon, Golden Tempo achieved the rarest of sports paradoxes. He captured the most prestigious prize in racing, yet walked away with a crown that half the world believed he didn't truly earn. On May 6th, 2026, the ultimate sports fantasy came to an abrupt, screeching halt. Just 4 days after the intoxicating chaos of Churchill Downs, the racing world woke up expecting a triumphant march toward Baltimore, only to be blindsided by a devastating press release. Cherie DeVaux made the unthinkable announcement: Golden Tempo was officially skipping the Preakness Stakes. Instantly, the roar of public adulation fell into bewildered silence. A perfectly healthy, thriving Kentucky Derby champion, sound and uninjured, was being intentionally pulled from the Triple Crown trail. This shocking decision triggered immediate panic and structural confusion across the entire sporting landscape. Fans felt blindsided. Mainstream media outlets rushed to unravel a narrative that defied a century of racing logic. It felt like a voluntary abdication of a crown that was right within his grasp. The burning question consumed every racetrack, sports bar, and executive boardroom. Why would a magnificent athlete at the peak of his physical powers willingly walk away from a date with destiny? By insulating Golden Tempo from the middle jewel, his connections didn't just break the traditional calendar, they broke the heart of the sports world. In a single morning, a chase for immortal glory was transformed into a polarizing high-stakes investigation. To the gatekeepers of American racing, Golden Tempo's strategic retreat from Baltimore was a direct assault on the soul of the sport. Old-school purists, veteran turf journalists, and devastated fans quickly united in fierce condemnation, accusing the colt's connections of a historic betrayal. By fracturing the single most captivating narrative in American sports, the team effectively starved horse racing of its most vital mainstream oxygen. The Triple Crown thrives on the visceral, unyielding drama of a continuous high-stakes chase. Denying the public that three-race Odyssey didn't just sideline a champion, it actively diluted the prestige and cultural relevance of the entire series. This furious backlash exposed a deep philosophical rift, threatening the future of the sport. Traditionalists argue that protective modern management is sanitizing the classics, lowering the historical bar of greatness to accommodate contemporary fragility. Legends like Secretariat and Affirmed are immortalized not because they were handled with caution, but because they survived the brutal, non-negotiable reality of the 2-week turnaround. By insulating Golden Tempo from that crucible, critics claim the team chose a safe corporate sanctuary over a date with destiny. For the purists, no performance at Saratoga could ever erase this stain. Golden Tempo may be a brilliant racehorse, but by refusing to face the ultimate test, he surrendered his right to sit alongside the true gods of the turf. Behind the closed doors of Phipps Stable and Vinnie Viola's St. Elias Stable, the pursuit of track glory immediately collided with the cold reality of bloodstock economics. Golden Tempo was never just a fast horse. He was an irreplaceable, multi-million-dollar genetic asset. As a flawlessly bred son of the legendary 2-time Horse of the Year Curlin, out of the graded stakes-winning matriarch Karumba, his biological blueprint represented astronomical future stallion value. In the elite boardroom of modern thoroughbred management, exposing an asset of this magnitude to the bone-crushing 2-week turnaround at Pimlico was an unacceptable gamble. The primary objective shifted entirely from chasing a public relations victory in Baltimore to safeguarding a generation-defining sire career. This protective strategy illustrates how contemporary racing syndicates now operate with the precision of Wall Street hedge funds. A single catastrophic injury or soul-crushing defeat at the Preakness could instantly slash tens of millions off a horse's commercial valuation. By aggressively bypassing the middle jewel, his high-profile owners prioritized institutional longevity over the dangerous siren song of immediate fame. They understood that a fresh, dominant classic winner entering a lucrative summer campaign provides a far stronger foundation for building a lasting breeding empire. This calculated decision forces an uncomfortable question on the entire industry. Has corporate bloodstock risk management permanently taken priority over competitive sporting legacy? For Golden Tempo's connections, the answer was unambiguous. Protecting the asset isn't dodging history. It's securing the empire. Golden Tempo's absence from Pimlico pushed the racing industry into a bitter confrontation with its own systemic shortcomings. To many insiders, this wasn't an isolated case of clever training. It was a glaring indictment of the physical durability of the modern racehorse. For decades, critics have warned that contemporary breeding practices have corrupted the breed, aggressively prioritizing explosive speed over structural bone density and raw stamina. The modern thoroughbred is frequently described as a brilliant but fragile creation, built purely for short bursts of velocity rather than the iron horse endurance that defined past generations. This reality turns Golden Tempo into the centerpiece of a much larger trial. Traditionalists point out that ancestral legends conquered the identical 35-day schedule without flinching. By conceding that a healthy Kentucky Derby champion requires 5 weeks of intensive recovery simply to race again, The modern establishment inadvertently fuels the accusation that the breed has grown structurally soft. Golden Tempo didn't just spark a debate about his own schedule, he exposed a profound existential crisis, forcing the world to question whether the modern sport is genuinely protecting its athletes or merely managing their genetic decline. While the rest of the 3-year-old division battered itself on the relentless Triple Crown trail, trainer Cherie DeVaux was quietly executing a masterclass in tactical engineering at Saratoga Race Course. Bypassing the Preakness granted Golden Tempo a luxurious 5-week sanctuary of uninterrupted rest and specialized preparation. DeVaux insulated the colt within the serene, world-class training facilities of upstate New York, far removed from the grueling midsummer heat and shipping stress actively draining his rivals. This extended recovery was pure oxygen for a deep closing athlete, allowing his muscular and metabolic systems to fully reset while DeVaux meticulously sharpened his explosive late kick. This blueprint was further magnified by a historic circumstance, the relocation of the classic itself. With Belmont Park undergoing major renovations, the 158th Belmont Stakes was held at Saratoga Race Course at a modified distance of 1.25 miles. This structural shift transformed the historic race into a tactical dream for a rested closer. DeVaux capitalized on the venue change, tuning the colt to peak with lethal precision. When the gates finally opened on June 6, 2026, Golden Tempo didn't just step onto the track. He arrived as a fully loaded high-octane machine. Fresh, dialed in, and utterly lethal. It forced one more uncomfortable question upon the industry. Was this brilliant scientific calibration or an unfair competitive advantage against a battered, exhausted division? On June 6, 2026, beneath the historic elms of Saratoga, the ultimate moment of reckoning arrived. Skeptics had loudly dismissed Golden Tempo's Derby triumph as a chaotic fluke, confidently predicting that a paceless race would thoroughly expose him. As the gates crashed open for the 158th Belmont Stakes, their predictions seemed to materialize. The early pace was agonizingly slow, a crawling tactical walk that heavily favored frontrunners and mathematically compromised deep closers. It was the nightmare scenario for a horse breaking from dead last. Yet what followed was a masterclass in raw athletic brilliance and pure redemption. Refusing to panic, jockey Jose Ortiz anchored the colt with ice-cold patience until the far turn, then finally let him loose. Golden Tempo exploded with a devastating, awe-inspiring turn of foot. Sweeping 4 wide into the stretch, he relentlessly wore down a stubborn commandment and a gritty, resurgent renegade before drawing clear with absolute authority, capturing the test of the champion by 1.25 lengths. By outmuscling the finest of his generation under unfavorable conditions, he systematically silenced the doubters. This wasn't survival, this was domination, and it forced the sport to confront one final defining question. Had Golden Tempo just proven, beyond all doubt, that he was the undisputed king of his era? When weighed through the uncompromising lens of sports history, a powerful case exists that bypassing Pimlico was fundamentally the wrong decision. By deliberately shielding Golden Tempo from the brutal 2-week turnaround, his connections actively denied him the ultimate test of athletic adversity. True sporting immortality isn't forged in a climate-controlled boardroom or a comfortable 5-week sanctuary. It is earned by staring down a grueling, non-negotiable challenge and conquering it anyway. By insulating the colt from the most demanding leg of the historic trail, his team lowered the historical bar of greatness, leaving a permanent asterisk beside an otherwise brilliant career. Furthermore, This calculated choice fractured the single most powerful narrative in American sports. The magic of horse racing relies entirely on the collective, electrifying dream of a Triple Crown sweep, a cultural phenomenon that bridges casual fans and hardcore purists alike. When a healthy Kentucky Derby champion voluntarily abdicates the throne, it deflates the entire racing calendar and damages the integrity of the classics. By choosing a risk-averse corporate strategy over a date with destiny, Golden Tempo's team prioritized commercial asset protection over competitive sporting legacy. He will forever be remembered as a magnificently managed athlete, but because his team refused to let him face the ultimate crucible, he was robbed of his rightful place among the immortal gods of the turf. When judged through the lens of modern equine science and long-term horsemanship, bypassing Pimlico was undeniably the right decision, and the Belmont Stakes delivered spectacular vindication. Cherie DeVaux' patient approach was a visionary masterstroke that placed the welfare of a magnificent athlete far above archaic public nostalgia. By refusing to subject Golden Tempo to the treacherous 2-week turnaround, she successfully insulated him from the severe physical regression that has historically broken down even the most brilliant 3-year-olds. The proof arrived on the track. A fresh, hyper-tuned colt effortlessly dismantled the finest of his generation at the Belmont Stakes. This strategy didn't just preserve a champion, it secured an immense, multi-million-dollar breeding empire. As a regally bred son of Curlin out of Corumba, Golden Tempo represents an irreplaceable genetic foundation. Forcing him into a maximum effort crucible at Pimlico simply to satisfy traditionalists would have been an irresponsible, short-sighted gamble with a generational asset. By securing a dominant dual classic legacy while protecting his long-term health, his connections pioneered a welfare-first blueprint for the modern era. Golden Tempo walks away from the classic trail not with a failure, but with an unassailable crown of his own making. He didn't fail the Triple Crown. He and his visionary team outsmarted an outdated system, proving that true greatness means conquering your era entirely on your own terms. Was Golden Tempo's strategic rest a visionary masterstroke of modern horsemanship, or did it permanently rob us of a racing legend? The choice is yours. Sound off in the comments with your verdict. If you crave high-stakes sports strategy, deep-dive racing analysis, and the untold stories behind the world's greatest athletes, hit that subscribe button, smash the like icon, and turn on notifications. Don't let the next chapter leave you behind. Join the community and stay ahead of the track today.